Good morning, folks. Dennis Jr. here with Zager Guitars in Lincoln, Nebraska. What I have in front of me is our ZAD80 series, our ZAD80 OM, and this is a pure acoustic. This is just like our full-size ZAD80 acoustic, but it's the smaller OM size. And I decided to pull our ZAD80 so you could see our regular size versus so you can kind of see the differences here. That one's sitting a little bit lower on the right, but to give you a good idea here of just the size differences on these guitars, from OM size to full size, you notice the full size is just a little bit thicker front to back, and on the front you'll notice the OM size, and it's about 15% smaller. The fretboard lengths are identical, the neck and everything like that is identical. The only difference between our ZAD80 OM on the left and our full-size ZAD80 is the box size and shape. And you'll notice the OM has more of an hourglass shape, where the full-size has less of an hourglass shape. And the difference is the OM will sit a little bit lower in your lap for this reason. So when you put it on your knee, it just sinks down a little lower, and you can get your arm up around it easier. And because it's thinner, again, front to back, you can pull it in a little closer. So it's just a little bit more comfortable guitar. My dad is an OM guy, loves OMs. Most of your finger stylists, I find, John Knowles, number 4 fingerstyle player in the world, he plays one of our 900 OMs, which is just like this guitar, but in the 900 series. I just find a lot of fingerstyle players, songwriters, things like that, they love the OMs because they're just a little bit more comfortable. Now, there is a caveat to that. You lose about 15% in bass and volume. So, you know, if you're trying to cover a room performing acoustically without plugging in, I'd probably recommend the full size. But if this is just for your own private enjoyment, maybe you write songs, that sort of thing, just like playing on the sofa, pulling it close under your arm, then probably like my dad, I'd recommend the OM. But I just wanted to pull that out so you could compare the size differences there. And I'll talk a little bit more about this guitar. As again, if you've looked at the specs on our ZAD80, our full size I just had out, they're identical on this guitar except for the box. That's the only thing that's different. And I'll go through the basics here if you haven't watched that video. Our ZAD80 series, we've been building it for about 30 years. It has a red cedar top, and it gives it a very warm, mellow sound. A lot of our customers are comparing this guitar with our 900 series and asking what's the difference sound-wise. I would say the 900 is just a little bit more powerful. It's a little crisper because it has a spruce top, where this is just a little bit more mellow sounding. Customers buying this guitar, I have a lot of guys coming from Taylor 814s buying this guitar. If you look at them, the Taylor's almost exactly the same size. We're using a lot of the same woods here. I think the Taylor's about a $6,000 guitar, but I've had a lot of guys give up their 814s for this guitar right here. So that tells you kind of where it performs sound-wise and playability-wise. That might help just a little. As far as our Easy Play features, I'll cover those just a little bit. Like all of our 80 and 900 series, all of our guitars in general, but specifically on the 80s and 900s, we put this special bracing system that gives in the face just slightly. And what this does is, when you hold down these strings and you're forming chords, it actually pulls just a little bit. We build it that thin on the face to where you don't have to press nearly as hard to hold your chords. Most of our players say it's about 50% less. So to give you an idea, you know, when you're running, if you're a pro player, you know, who running up and down the fretboard, when you barely have to press to form chords. I mean, my dad always says it's like power steering. I mean, you can just slide up and down. It makes it fun, makes it enjoyable. For our pro artists on stage, you know, that's the difference between being able to play an hour set on stage versus 2 to 3 hours. And if you look at our reviews and that sort of thing, you'll see our artists comment on that. The other thing with this thinner bracing system, it gives more in the face, and that means it moves more in the face. And anytime you have more movement in the face, you get a bigger sound. You'll always hear players comment about our guitars, about not only are they're very easy to play, but they put out a very big sound. And you don't really have to get on the strings really hard. You know, there's a lot of players out there who beat on the strings real hard, and that's just their style. But you know, in doing so, you're knocking your guitar out of tune and those sort of things. You don't have to do that with our guitars. You get a big sound just barely touching it. So other features, you'll notice the string stance on our guitars, if you look real close, is just a little wider side to side. A lot of players think our necks are wider. They are not. We go with a wider string stance. If our necks were any wider, and we run a 1 3/4 and a 1 11/16, we got both choices, but most of our customers take the 1 3/4. This extra side-to-side string stance, more space between the strings, make it so you're not leaning on adjacent strings. And maybe you have bigger fingers. That can make a world of difference that way, so you're not leaning on strings. You'll see with our guitars, in just playing, I've had a lot of guys say the minute I got on a Zager, I wasn't making the mistakes I was making before, and I was able to move a lot faster. So as far as you smaller handed players, we still run a very slim neck design front to back, so you're able to get your hand around it with ease, but then you have that nice space in between the strings on front. And again, if you go too wide on this neck, sometimes I have guys coming at me saying, I need that 1 7/8, or I need even wider than that. Anytime you go over 1 3/4 in general, it makes it impossible to use the thumb of the left hand to form chords. My dad's one of those players who plays with his thumb of his left hand. John Knowles, a lot of these guys, if you're a Chet Atkins type player, you're using the thumb of your left hand. So we want to make that achievable, and you can't do it when you go any wider than this. So just keep that in mind. And I have a lot of guys who are coming from wider neck guitars than this one who say, I have more space on your guitar. It's because of our side-to-side spacing. Beyond that, like all Zagers, it has a custom handmade cowbow nut. We get these our bones straight from Lincoln, Nebraska here. It's still amazing how many guitars you see with plastic nuts. You shouldn't technically do that. I think a lot of manufacturers are trying to save money. This is a handmade custom guitar. It comes with a handmade custom nut. Each nut my dad makes for each single guitar. Same goes for the saddle. The saddle, again, handmade bone. He sets intonation levels here for each particular guitar. That means it comes into tune with itself. It tunes easier. You'll see in a lot of our reviews where customers say my guitar stays in tune longer, it tunes up easier. This is why. It's because you have a custom handmade for only this guitar saddle where the intonation has been set. As far as fretboards, instead of ebony, we are using Bolivian rosewood. And a lot of customers say, why aren't you using ebony like Martin does? And we found with ebony, because it's such a dense wood, puts off a little bit tinnier of a sound than the Bolivian rosewood. And it does cost us a little more for the rosewood, but we find it puts off just a little bit warmer sound. Also, long term, we found we had, because we used ebony for many years too, probably about 20, 30 years. Ebony, since it's so dense, we have a little higher propensity for fret springing on ebony. So we found